everybody. Welcome to the Buyer Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Fedie from SalesReach. I'm excited to have you back, and we have yet another author on the show today. We've had a handful of them, and it's been a lot of fun because then I get to, well, one, I get a free book out of it. Usually I get a signed book out of it, and I know this guest has already got one in the mail for me. But number two, then I get to add the book to the SalesReach library so that everybody can order their own and learn even more from the guest. So this is going to be really, really great. I'm excited for everybody to meet this guest. We're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about buyer enablement. This is going to be great. This guest is coming to us from Canada, which I believe this is my first Canadian guest. So, Canada has some great things, such as Mike Myers. Beyond that, I'm going to let David enlighten me on the other great things that come from Canada. Everybody, help me welcome David Priemer to the Buyer Enablement Podcast. Here we go.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, you said, another author. I was like, have you exceeded your quota of authors that you're allowed to have on the program?
We've had a lot of authors. Yeah, I'm going to have to cap it pretty soon. No, I love having authors on. And actually what was funny about it is it wasn't planned that way. And it just so happened that many of the guests had either written books or came out with books soon after they were on the podcast. And then it just kind of became this organic thing where it's like, wait a minute, if you're producing all this value in other places, how else can we help you to spread that message? And so we just kind of rolled out the SalesReach library kind of as a joke because it's like, look, all these guests have books. We might as well put their books up with their podcasts, right? So I'm excited to put yours on there. But David, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Well, it's funny when you say so we have an author. It's funny because I don't necessarily think of myself as an author. Like I do other things, and then I also wrote a book, versus the other way around. But no, look, like everyone who ended up in sales, and there's many of us, I'm no different because I ended up in sales by accident. I started my career as a research scientist over 20 years ago and ended up getting into sales at the turn of the dot-com boom. Ended up joining a startup at the time, and it was a 20-person startup, and we grew it to 700 people and a $100 million business. And I fell in love with sales because it was so complicated and it had so many variables, right? Like just like my science and engineering background, I'm like, this is awesome. Why didn't my guidance counselor tell me I could do this? And then over the course of the next 20 years, I spent my time across 4 high-growth startups. 3 of them ended up being acquired. One, which I helped start in 2008, was acquired by Salesforce. Came over with the ship, spent 5 awesome years at Salesforce, learning how the sales machines were built at scale. But you know what? Through that whole time, I was plagued by this problem, which I suspect a lot of your listeners and the folks who are clients of your company experience as well, Josh. Which is like people have to buy things, but they just hate talking to salespeople, right? And so I said, I have to take hopefully what I've learned, from all the startups and the sales trenches and kind of harmonize that with my science background and try to help, people do this amazing profession as well as they can. So that's what I do now. That's the story.
I love it. There's the takeaway right there. People have to buy stuff, but they hate talking to salespeople, right? It's a brutal reality. It really is. It's a hard pill to swallow. But let's clarify. They don't hate talking to salespeople. They hate talking to salespeople. They hate talking to people that all they're doing all day is just selling, hawking their wares, right? Not considering their buyer's needs and just trying to hit a quota and trying to get a number. That's a salesperson, right?
Well, yeah, like I often ask people that, when I could be in a room full of 1,000 salespeople giving a talk, and I'll say, who here likes talking to salespeople, right? And only a couple people raise their hands. And so I do this as well, with my clients, my training, and I do little Zoom polls. I ask people what do you think? And then I take a second. I say, okay, hold on a second. If you say, this is what you do for a living, first of all, okay? And you don't like talking to people like yourself, why is that? Who do you, when you close your eyes and you picture the worst salesperson you could ever picture, I would ask that to you, Josh. If you close your eyes, you picture the worst salesperson you could ever picture. Who do you picture in your head?
I mean, the second you say that, I think about the old Sales Badger commercials. It's not an actual person. So anyone listening, just go to YouTube and look up Sales Badger. And the Sales Badger, so I started my career in sales in car sales. That's how I started. The Sales Badger is a very real persona. I mean, everybody has known somebody. Have you ever seen the Sales Badger videos?
I have not, but now I have to Google. I'm going to wait till after the podcast. And I'll
Your
Google
entire day has officially been ruined. You're going to binge this and rewatch this over and over and over. These are very old, and honestly, the humor in them would not pass today. So it's not that I'm endorsing a lot of the sentiment in the videos, but that is unfortunately what a lot of people think of when they think about a salesperson is just, I'm going to walk in this room or I'm going to get on this call, and this person's job is to make sure I can't say no. And when I walk out of here, I'm going to be handing them over money, and there's no way out. And I don't know what it is about that type of sales person that they can actually get in somebody's head and convince them to move forward when everything inside them is saying, no, this isn't right. I don't need this. And so many times they just say yes so they can get out of the room, and then they immediately call up and say, I need to get out of this. And then that starts a whole nother conversation of stress and anxiety and ... But that is unfortunately what so many people think of, right? And that's why I encourage people, stop calling yourself a salesperson. Call yourself a strategist and align yourself in your customer or prospect's company to help them solve their challenges, and just consider yourself a strategist aligned with their goals instead of a salesperson, because there's a reason that being a salesperson, quote unquote salesperson, has a negative connotation. People have ruined it. But sales is still the best job in the world. We have the most fun. We do the coolest things. We get to celebrate more than any other team in any other company. Sales is life, right? We need to embrace it and just change the perception of what it is.
Absolutely. Look, changing the perception starts with changing the behaviors of salespeople, because exactly to your point, when you think about, okay, that sleazy used car salesperson, like, why do I picture that person when I think about the worst salesperson I can ever imagine? And part of it is motivation. So we're always questioning, like, what's their motivation? Like, is this a piece of shit car and they're trying to, put it off on us, or do they have a quota they're trying to make? And certainly quotas can be very tough taskmasters. Everyone in sales knows at the end of the month, end of the quarter, you end up working at an unsustainable pace, making all these calls, right? And it's, as a manager, what are we doing? Like, I'm a manager back at Salesforce, and I'm going out and I'm telling my team, make the calls, like, tell there's never been a better time to buy. This needs to be the best quarter ever, right? And we get on this kind of treadmill where customers are always weary of what our intentions are. We operate with a certain amount of confirmation bias, meaning like, we think everyone's like a good fit for our product and service, and we go out there and we make our customers feel like they're being sold to. And then, to your point, we try to corner off all the angles. So is there any reason, Josh, why you wouldn't be able to move forward today? And we try to do all these things to kind of corner customers and take away their freedom to get them to buy. And I'm not saying that salespeople are bad people. I do believe, like you believe, sales is the best profession in the world when done correctly. And I also believe that there are a lot of bad salespeople out there who are not bad people. They're good people, right? They have families, they play sports, they have hobbies, they have people who love them, but they go out there and they execute these tactics because, and this is, I'm going back to the Cobra Kai. I'm 45 years old. So 1984, when The Karate Kid came out, it was one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, we're not talking about this new Netflix recreation BS that nobody should be watching, but I did fall into it, in all honesty. But
you know what? It's the new Netflix creation is actually pretty good. It's light. It's like nostalgic for.
I watch it when my wife isn't around because she loses a little bit of love for me every time she sees me watching it. But it actually is. It brings me back. Look, I'm 42, David. So like we grew up at the same time. Daniel's girlfriend in Karate Kid, she was everything to me when I was growing up, right? Like that was who I wanted to marry right there. But anyway, I'll let you keep going. So Cobra Kai.
Yeah, so Cobra Kai. So you have these kids who are like jerks and they're bullies and they do all these bad things. Actually, this is the way I start off the book. The first chapter is called The Cobra Kai Paradox. Then I said, these are seemingly on the surface bad kids, but if you remember what happens at the end of the first Karate Kid, right? Now you got like, what's her name? Her name is Elizabeth Shue. Like she's in my head now, right?
She anyway, yeah.
So at the end of the Karate Kid, when like Daniel actually wins, and like Johnny LaRusso, Johnny Lawrence, he takes the he takes the championship trophy and he like fights through the crowd of people who are congratulating Daniel, and he gives it to him and he says, "You're all right, LaRusso," right? Like as though he has this little mini epiphany that like, I was listening to what my sensei told me, but I realize now like that was stupid. I shouldn't do that anymore. And that's actually what the whole new series is based on, is like him realizing that. But that's what happens in the world of modern selling, is we go out and we execute these tactics that our sensei taught us only because the sensei before them taught them. And not only have a lot of these tactics been shown to now produce the kind of the counterintuitive result, but the world of buying, which is the world you're in, Josh, has changed so much, never mind in the last 20 years, like in the last 1 year, right? Now that we're filming this kind of hopefully at the tail end of the pandemic, wherever you happen to be. And, the world of buying has changed so much. And that's the thing that we need to wrap our head around, is that the world of buying has changed. We can't execute the same Cobra Kai tactics that maybe once worked, right? We need to change it up so that people, not only we can be more effective, but people will have a different perception of the profession. Because when you go out and you execute those tactics, not only do they not work, you just ruin sales for everyone.
Listen, all right, so number one, I had a little tear come into my eye when you were reminding me about the Trophy Handoff scene. I mean, that's a powerful moment. There's very few movies that actually make me choke up. That scene always gives me a little bit of a choke up. Not a huge one. Have you ever seen the end of Rudy? Man, I'm dead every time. Rudy's father. Oh, man, when his father claps in the stands and Rudy, oh, man, I don't even want to talk about it right now. Literally, I get choked up even thinking about it. But you're right. You're right. And we all know, when anyone that grew up in the era that we did with Karate Kid, and that sensei that was just former military and just yelling and screaming and hit first, strike first, right? Strike first, strike hard, show no mercy. Wasn't that their chant? Man, you're bringing me right back into this thing. But everybody's worked with that person, and I'm not going to throw out names, but if you're on LinkedIn at all, like there's some people making videos on LinkedIn every single day that are basically that person, right? And there's some big personalities that for whatever reason a lot of people really follow. And again, I'm not going to mention names, but I really want to. But you know who I'm talking about.
Do you know who you're talking about?
That's that person, right? And I recently was, I'm in the market right now for some technologies that my company is going to be licensing for our efforts as well. And so I was reaching out to some other companies, and this just happened. I mean, it was one of the most disgusting, disturbing displays of a product demonstration and hard sell that I've ever seen in my life, right? It was literally, I scheduled off the website. It was a 30-minute call, and at the end of 30 minutes, I essentially felt like, you either sign on the dotted line right now or you're dead to us, was literally how I'm not even exaggerating, like that is literally how I felt leaving that call. And what was hilarious about that was that I was conducting one of my own demos for my company about a week later. And the person I was demoing my product to, look, they're always looking at building their sales tech. So they're talking to a lot of the same businesses I might be reviewing to build my own sales tech stack in my company, right? And I got done with the demo, and the person literally said, Josh, I got to tell you, that was insanely refreshing. Thank you so much. That was a great demo. I recently had a demo with XYZ, the same company that I had just been with. I just had a demo with this other company, and they made me feel absolutely horrible. And I was so nervous coming into this call that it was going to be more of that. This person came into a call with me with a tremendous amount of anxiety because they had literally just been through the ringer with another company that just pressure cookered them. And I know that this is coming from leadership. I know that this is just how that organization sells, right? And that is just unfortunate, because it not only ruins their chances for themselves, it ruins my chances for myself too, because when I started my demo call, the first thing I had to do was break down that barrier, overcome that, become likable, gain trust, get them over that hurdle of, is this guy going to force me? Is this guy going to strong arm me into giving him money just like the last person did? That's intense. That's intense. So I can't wait to read the book, read that first chapter.
you go. You can stop after that first chapter. I think you'll just enjoy it, just for that, the Cobra Kai.
I don't know if that's the best. You want people to read the whole book. That's the whole point of writing a book. But
if you have time, I'm saying.
Yeah, if you have time to keep going. So the title of the book. Tell everybody the title of the book, because this is great.
Yeah, the book is called Sell the Way You Buy. And it's called Sell the Way You Buy, a modern approach to sales that actually works even on you. And it's funny because when you go through the project of writing a book and you come up with like a working title, and you're like, hey, look, this is the working title. It's like a film. Like maybe it'll change as we go through. And it never did. It stuck all the way through. And the way I think about like what does Sell the Way You Buy mean? People ask me that, and I say, look, it means two things. Number one, there's like an empathetic component, which is the golden rule of just don't do stuff that wouldn't work on you, right? And sometimes as salespeople, we need to be a little bit more introspective because we go out and we execute these tactics that would never work on us if we found ourselves on the buying side, but we do them because, again, our sensei told us we think, we need to act differently in our sales mode than we do in like normal human mode. So that's number one. But in a way, like that's almost like the smaller of the two definitions. The real important one, which I believe Sell the Way You Buy relates to, is this idea that we need to be really curious about the pathways and mechanisms by which we make purchasing decisions, because the science and research shows that we make these purchasing decisions based on very well-defined pathways that are often not transparent to us. So like, even if I said, like we're all nostalgic for taking a vacation. So if I were to say like, Josh, where'd you go on your last vacation? Where'd you go, Josh, on your last vacation?
It was the best time of my life. I went to New York with just my daughter.
First of all, it's a magical trip. When I used to work at Salesforce, I used to run small business sales for the Eastern U.S. So I had teams in New York and Atlanta and Toronto. So I did the same thing. I was in New York every month. 1 month I flew my oldest daughter. I have 3 daughters, so she was 10 at the time.
Yeah.
Flew her down. It was magical. But so I would say, okay, great. So you went on that vacation to New York. And if I were to ask you, like, what was the return on investment of that vacation to New York? You would probably be like, okay, this is like hard to quantify. But if I said, look, do you believe there was a return on investment? And you're like, of course. Yeah, deep in the relationship with my daughter. We had a good time. It was relaxing, all this kind of stuff. And I say, great. Where else could you have gone? Right? Like you could have gone to another city. You could have had a staycation. You could have gone to Europe or the Caribbean. And I would have said, well, like, great. Like, what was the ROI would have been of those things, right? And so this idea of like when we buy things primarily based on feelings that are not transparent to us and are very difficult to come to terms with and justify. So if I asked you, why'd you go to New York? You'd be like, oh, it's fun, like this, whatever. But you wouldn't get down to like the real, meaty reason of why you decided to go there versus somewhere else. So this idea of like how we actually buy things is a very complicated, topic. And for the same reason that salespeople struggle with confirmation bias and all these like high pressure tactics, as buyers, we experience the same thing. Like if you were to pick something that you spend money on, that another I don't want to out you here, but like let's say what's something you spend money on, Josh, that another person would look at and say, that's ridiculous. I don't understand.
Oh, lots of things, but I think the things that most people comment on, I have a love of 3 things outside my family: cars, cigars, and scotch. Those are the 3 things, man. That is, those are my passions outside of my family, right? And those are all ridiculous things to spend your money on. But anyway.
Well, no, look at a car. Someone would say, okay, unless you're investing on some kind of collector car that's going to increase in value, it's going to decrease. And like, isn't a car just a to B kind of a thing? Like, why did you buy that car? Why did you get the top of the line and without all these, So the thing is, we all value different things at different points in our lives for different reasons. And Sell the Way You Buy is all about being just really curious about how people make these decisions so that you can align your sales motion to them in a very human feeling way, right? So that you're not putting on your sales hat and you're acting differently, but you're conscious of how your customers are buying, what they're thinking about, and you're aligning your sales motion accordingly. That's what the book's all about.
Okay, listen. So I'm just gonna riff with you on this because I'm naturally just a storyteller, right? So there's a couple of things that you pointed out there. Number one, curiosity. Curiosity is the number one thing that I personally look for in a new sales hire. If you're not a naturally curious person, this is going to be a really hard job for you. And I know a lot of people like to hire athletes. I actually like to look for people that had some form of art in their background, right? Musician, artist, poet, whatever it might be. Somebody that knows how to embrace the things that are happening around them and create beautiful things out of the things that are happening around them. I feel like that is the kind of skill set that really helps lead someone down a great buying process, number one. Number two, though, when you're asking, why did you go to New York? What was the ROI on that, right? Why do you spend the money on the things that you do? Here's what I believe. Number one, I had very strong reasons for all. I have very strong reasons for all the things that I do, and I have associations with all the things that I do, and things maintain in my life because of the associations. What this all comes back to is the experience that you create around what's happening in your buying process, okay? I'm very loyal to certain brands, okay? For example, I only drink two kinds of scotch, Johnny Walker and Oban. Those are the only two that I drink. Why do I drink Johnny Walker? Why do I do that? Because the first boss that I had when I first got out of being in car sales and being in telemarketing, the first person that gave me a chance in my life, Johnny Walker was his drink of choice. I had never drank scotch in my life, but that's what we sat in the office and celebrated with. And that became a thing that just became part of me, right? Why do I love cars? Why? My father was a mechanic. My wife's father built hot rods. One of my cars is the hot rod that he built with his bare hands, right? A 33 Plymouth with a 57 Hemi. This is a car nobody needs in their life, ever. I have it. It's amazing. And I feel good. And that's why when I get in that car, someone might look at me and go, well, you know what? That Kia over there, that $12,000 Kia, that would have got you from point A to point B. Yep. But I would have felt different while I was doing it. I would have felt like a different person while I was doing it. Life is too short to not drive fun cars, okay? That's why I would say that. New York, what's the ROI on that? Well, number one, I don't ever just go, I'm a salesperson, so I never just go on a trip without any sort of business objective, right? So I was technically going out to New York to meet with a prospect to turn them into a customer, right? This was back in the day where we still flew to land business, way pre-COVID. But my daughter was a huge fan of the movie Elf. And if you've seen Elf, you know, New York, that's kind of the place to be, right? So she had to come with. And it turned into the most magical, memorable experience. It will be the last thing that I remember when I die, without question, because it was everything. And I had been to New York before, and I hated New York. I've always hated New York. New York is not my jam. In my opinion, it's dirty, it's overcrowded. I can't stand it. But being there with my daughter changed my perception of it because now I have a totally different experience to equate it with. The whole reason I'm drilling in and talking way too long about all of these things is because I want to drill in the fact that the experience that you create when you're engaging with your prospects matters because they're going to remember you. They're going to remember the interactions that you had. When somebody asks them about your product, service, or you, what are they going to say? Right? Are they going to have a story to tell? Are they going to say, yeah, oh, Josh is great, man. He took me to the best restaurant. I've had the best steak of my life with him. He always knows the best place to go. And then I had a question about something that he couldn't solve for, and he introduced me to the best person to solve it. He knows the best people. Like he's a great connector. That's what you want to hear. Not, oh yeah, I dealt with Josh too. He's a POS, right? That guy, he strong-armed me into a thing, and it didn't do what he said it was going to do. And you've probably had that same conversation with him. He's slimy as hell, right? Don't ever buy from him. I would only refer him to my worst enemy. That's who I'd refer him. That's not what you want. It's one of those two, though. It's the experience is everything.
Look, and so if you ever pick up the book, and I know, Josh, you're going to get the book, chapter 4 is all about this concept of the experience as the product. Like the experience as the product. And companies who do this really well are very easy to spot. And I'll tell you, one of the things that, interesting story. So I run a sales leadership meetup. There's 200 sales leaders, high growth companies, just because sales leadership can be a very lonely job. So it's kind of like a support group we have for sales leaders. And we were actually hosting a dinner one night, and there was about 20 of us around the table. And of course, sales leaders, when they get together, some of the things they talk about are the technologies that they use. So they say, hey, look, I'm not going to name the vendors or the kind of technology. I'm looking at this kind of technology. And one person says to the other, a leader says to the other, it's like, I'm looking at company A, company B. What do you think? And they say, oh my gosh, this rep from company B has just been hounding me, and I can't believe how bad they are. And then another leader overhears it and says, hold on a second, that's not, and he says the name, right? He's like, that's not this person, is it? And yeah, like that's who called me too, right? And then just it floats around the table about this, and none of this, everyone was sharing these experiences with this horrible rep. None of it had anything to do with the product, right, or the company, but it was just this idea that the experience is the product. And even in let's say non-sales sales industries, an experienced personal trainer once told me, he said, what's the secret to being a good personal trainer? Like, I don't have to be jacked or be able to do the exercises like the way even my clients can. It's just being organized, showing up on time, giving good advice, holding people accountable. They appreciate that experience. And it's the same thing in sales as well. Showing up on time, being responsive, not feeling like you're adding pressure to their situation, adding value with every interaction. And all these things are actually not hard to do, right? It just requires you to kind of set aside your mental state for a second and stop focusing on your quota and stop focusing on your pressures and start focusing on them. It's so easy, but absolutely, we all buy experiences. That's the product. And companies are willing to pay more. Buyers are willing to pay more for a great experience. That's why you have these premium brands, the Disneys, the Porsches, the BMWs, have these great experiences because that's part of what they're selling is the product.
Without question. Without question. And listen, when you were talking earlier about it's the sensei, having like the wrong sensei. What you're saying here, yes, you're right. It is not hard unless you work for that person, right? I mean, if you're working in a pressure cooker and if you're not focused on the long game, if you're focused on the short gains because you have to, right? If you're working for somebody that doesn't understand that, like, if we do this right and we let this take 6 months instead of 1 month to close, we're actually going to make 3 times as much money, and we're going to maintain them as a customer longer, and we're going to bring in a bunch of referral business, and right, ... If you're not focused on that, that is where it's hard, when you don't either A, have the right to focus in the right way because the people that you're working under won't allow you to work that way, don't understand working in that way, or you've just always been coached that way and nobody's ever sat you down and said, look, can you imagine? Like, can you imagine you being on the other side of you? What would you do? How would you feel? Right? But it does. It's the experiences create the positive association, the memorable positive association. The brand becomes stronger because of the association with the individual that brought them into that brand. The companies that are understanding that today are really winning. They really are. And it's different. It's different. The brand narrative for many years was controlled by marketing. Marketing created the story. People just kind of followed suit. You'd put out a bunch of commercials or ads. That's how people fell in love with your brand. That's not really, I mean, in the B2C world, that's still how it works. But in the B2B world, that's not how it works at all. When was the last time you bought something because you thought of a company because of something the company itself did, right? And that's the reason you reached out, right? Usually, you are brought into that company through somebody that you have some sort of trust with because you either follow their content or you've been referred to them by somebody. Then you start building a positive brand association, and then that brand benefits from that experience.
I agree with you, but also I'm going to partially disagree with you, Josh. So I agree with you. Yes, like you can have like let's say a run of the mill company with a great sales experience, and you're like, oh, you got to go see Josh, because he's going to treat you right. And like the product itself, it's a good product, right? But like Josh is fantastic. I do agree that's the case. However, there's a lot of studies, for example, one I often cite, the Edelman Earned Brand Study. So Edelman is a global research firm. They put out this earned brand study every year or two in 2018, 19, and then they did like a little addendum the summer of 2020, kind of pandemic focused. They said that 2/3 of customers report buying a product from a company because of a position that company took on a societal issue. So this idea that like buyers are belief-driven buyers, like when we find organizations and salespeople that believe what we believe, we show them immediate trust and affinity. So, for example, I might go buy a product from Salesforce because say, look, Gartner Magic Quadrant and the great products, all that kind of stuff. My gosh, they do so much good in the world, and they're a lightning rod for equality and diversity and all these great things. And like, I feel good about putting my money with them. And interestingly enough, that trend held true for 2018, 19. And then in 2020, in the summer 2020, they kind of tweaked some of the questioning where people were saying that, yes, I chose to invest in this company because of the way that they handled the pandemic. Because of a specific response to the pandemic, I believe that they are doing a great job in that regard. And so, yeah, that was another reason why people invested. So there is like a company-specific belief, but I'd say both can be independent of each other. I could buy from a company, even though I didn't have the great sales experience, because I believe so much in what this company's doing, or a regular company can win my business just because the salesperson was so amazing.
I love that. If you could send me that article after the podcast, I'd love to put that in the show notes for people to look up on their own. I love that. And listen, this is so important. I've talked about this on other podcasts before. When companies actually do social good, when they are an actual good company. And speaking of Salesforce, I mean, I just read just this morning, Mark Benioff, he's packing up planes with oxygen and all kinds of stuff heading right to India right now to help with this pandemic. He's done a lot of great things. He's somebody that I hope to meet someday because I think I'd have a really fun time having a conversation with him. But yes, it helps build the loyalty. And what I always say is when your company's doing things like that, tie the social good that your company's doing to you as a person and your personal brand and why that aligns with your desire for bringing more good into the world. Communicate the message of, this is why I work at Salesforce, okay? I work at Salesforce because look at the amazing things Salesforce is doing, right? And that is, again, it's just going to help by association, both sides win in a situation like that. So I love that. So we're not really disagreeing. We're agreeing and we're elaborating. That's what we're doing. I love that. I love that.
Beliefs are so powerful. And so actually, it's one of the things that I talk about in the book and in my practice as well is, if beliefs are so powerful, how can we lead? I refer to this as how can we lead with what we believe in a customer interaction? Because like, they don't really care. People are always, especially, they're focused on like prospecting, or there's like a million players in my space, and how am I going to differentiate myself? And a lot of people will start leading with like the features, the functions, even the benefits. And so I advocate for a bunch of different things. Number one, I always say, like, lead with the problem, fall in love with the problem, fall in love with the pain, lead with that, not the product, but also like lead with what you believe. So for example, if let's say I'm an author, I'm a sales trainer, and I say, hey, look, I believe sales is the best profession in the world. And I also believe that there's a lot of bad salespeople out there, but I also believe they're not bad people, right? They're good people. They're just executing these Cobra Kai tactics. And I believe that if you want to be successful as a seller in the modern world, you need to execute tactics that are rooted in science and empathy. Those are the things that I believe. Now, what I did that on purpose, like a little bit of an I believe narrative. Nowhere in that narrative was what I actually do. Oh, I train people and have a book and there's slides and I come in and this is how much I charge and here's what people say about the experience. Like, no, I just led with what I believe. And if you believe what I believe, then you're going to lean in and you're going to say, tell me more. What is it that you do? Which is the real trick. When you're trying to communicate what it is that you do, a lot of people, especially when they're prospecting, they feel that they need to communicate the sum total of like all of their goodness in the first 30 seconds. But in reality, it's like a newspaper article. I'm just giving you the headline so that you lean in and want to read the rest of it, right? Like, I've now earned the right to explain the rest. And beliefs are super powerful in that regard. So you can buy the book. I'm being very nonchalant about the book, but I give away tons of content online as well. I have tons of articles and videos about this on my channels where you can see like this tactic I call the belief statement, just leading with what you believe. Now there's like some tricks to how you do that. It's not like, oh, just say I believe and say whatever, but beliefs are very powerful.
All right, I'm sold. So we're at that point where I got to ask, what's the cost here, David? No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. No, this is great. This has been really awesome having you on. I can't wait to receive my copy of the book. I want to read this real bad. Just from the title alone, I was like, all right, this is a dude talking about the same sort of stuff I like to talk about. I got to read this one. I know I'm going to learn something from it. Let's go. So my book will be arriving soon. Once I get it, we'll be putting that into the SalesReach library. So anybody that's like hasn't come across this yet, just go to my profile on LinkedIn. That's kind of where I share the link to this library, and there'll be a direct link to purchase that book from David. David, are you going to be offering up like a signed copy for people off of the SalesReach library or anything fun like that? What do you think? I do put you on the spot here. What do you want to do? Should we do something fun?
We might. It's interesting. So I'm trying to think, do I have one of these here? I have, because I know a lot of people have the book. Yeah. And then the question is, okay, well, like, then, what do we do? Like, if, you want a signed copy. So what I actually have are these book branded. Hold on. Wait right here, Josh. Hold on a second. I'm coming back. Okay, here we go. So hold on a sec. So this is the book. This is the book right here. And I have these book branded stickers that, they're branded. They kind of look the same as the book. And what I do for a lot of people who say, hey, look, David, I have your book, but, can I do like a virtual signature? So I've been sending a signed book. These are called book plates. It's an actual thing where like I sign it and then it's a sticker. You stick it in your book and it's like, boom, virtual signing. So I'm happy to, if people are interested in that, I'm happy to hook your listeners up with that.
All right. Well, if you order a book through the SalesReach library, just make sure to like comment in your order or send David a message and say, listen, I'm ordering this because of the SalesReach podcast and I want that book plate in there. David, before we go, I got to ask you, now that you moved, I couldn't see this before, and I saw something on the wall behind you, which looks to me like the first iteration of a business. What is this? What am I looking at here?
It's a good question. So if you go to my YouTube channel and you want the full story, on Christmas Eve 2018, I published a video, and the video is entitled, What's That Thing on the Wall Behind Me? Because people kept asking, so what is actually, so I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, this idea of leading with what you believe, start with why. His favorite book of mine is actually Leaders Eat Last. And anyway, so 5 years ago, I was at a conference in New York City. It was a sales conference called Sales Machine. It was put on by Salesforce and Sales Hacker. And he was one of the speakers. And the organizer, I worked at Salesforce at the time. The organizers knew that I was a big Simon Sinek fan. And at that talk, he riffed a talk which is now the foundation of his book, The Infinite Game. He was like backstage. He was supposed to talk about leadership, and like Seth Godin apparently like egged him on, like, dude, you should go out there and like do this. I don't know if he said the word dude, but like, dude, you should go out there and like riff this talk that you're thinking of. So it blew me away, because this whole idea of the infinite game is just about like doing what you love, trying to get better every day. You're not trying to beat anyone. And so he gave this talk, and it was just him on stage with a flip chart. And so after the session, the organizers came to me and they gave me like this 3M flip chart that I literally have the rest of the pages here. And I took it to Simon, and I told him I was a big fan, and I got to meet him, and he signed. So he signed that page of the flip chart that he did on it. So you can see it says kind of like SS in the middle here.
Yeah. And
anyway, so it's on YouTube actually. You could just search Sales Machine Simon Sinek. And so anyway, so I love the talk and I love the concept. So I framed the picture, I framed that piece of the flip chart just to remind me every day that, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm doing, and hopefully, I ask people, I say, can you tell that I love what I do? I love what I do a lot, and I hope you can feel it. And that's part and parcel of the experience that we create. And I have the poster on the wall there to remind me, not that I need a lot of reminding, but like, I do what I do. I didn't write a book because it's like a massive money-making proposition or, fame and fortune. I did it because I wanted to do it. It was part of my mission to try to do everything I can to make the world of sales better. And anyway, so that's what this is behind.
It's just yet another visual reminder of a positive experience in your life, right? And something that motivated you, and something that I believe it's important to have things like that. I'm, you're seeing in the video, I clearly I decorate things, right? I like to work in a comfortable environment. I like to have my creature comforts. It helps me stay focused, and it helps me stay motivated. One of the ugly things that I have on my desk next to me every single day is this disgusting looking piece of paper right here. There we go. I'll pull back. What that is that was literally the sketch in the brewery 4 years ago when I was trying to convince 2 developers and a UX designer to help me build this dream of an idea that I had. This was me a couple beers in going, oh, let me show you what it's going to look like, right? This was me asking the waitress for a marker and a piece of paper out of their printer, right? And this is what became our current company, right? You got to keep these things around. It's hideous. I don't like looking at that. That's a horrible sketch.
You
right?
know what? You got to call that. So I was on another podcast where someone said, David, like, what's your origin story? I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. It makes me feel like I'm Wolverine, right? So I say to you, like, that's part of your origins. Like, that's the way you should introduce it. This is my origin story.
This is it. This is, it's very touchy-feely. I like that. David, it's been great having you on here. Real quick, anybody looking to get in contact with you, you threw out a couple of different ways, but what's the best way for somebody to engage and interact and contact you?
Look, you can always reach out on LinkedIn. I love connecting with readers and folks on LinkedIn, so you can hit me up. You check the spelling of my name in the show notes, I'm sure. And you can find me. I give away a lot of my content for free on my website, which is Cerebral Selling, all one word, cerebralselling.com. Articles, videos. I got a YouTube channel by the same name, and the book is called Sell the Way You Buy. You can find that on Amazon, wherever you buy books. It's an Audible. So if you want to listen to 6.5 hours of me reading my book, then you can check that out as well. But yeah, easy to find.
It took you 6.5 hours to read that book? My God. Yeah.
Edited down 6.5 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I've been watching these authors coming out with these audibles, and I go, wow, I don't know if I could sit in a room and talk that long. So kudos to you for getting that done. You read it yourself, huh?
Yeah, well, you know what? I wasn't I wasn't going to do it. My publisher said, you don't have to read the book yourself. Like, you can get a professional narrator. It's all good. It'll actually take them less time and be less expensive for you. And I was going down that road, even was auditioning. I put out a blast to my email subscribers, hey, vote for your favorite narrator. And then I just thought, if I got to listen to someone else read my book, I'm not going to like that. Yeah. So I decided to read it. And at first I was like, I don't want, it's like listening to yourself speak all the time. Like, I don't want to listen to myself read my book. It's a lot of reading. It's a 280-page book, 70,000 words. But I'll tell you one thing. I loved reading my book so much. It reminded me as I read it how excited I was about the content. And because I wrote it, I was very familiar with the sentence structure. So there wasn't that many like blips and beeps and like things that I kind of got wrong. And it got me really fired up. So any author out there, if you're kind of on the fence, read your book. And I'll tell you, the readers, when they give me feedback, they say, like, I'm so happy you decided to read your book. Because like you can hear it in the author's voice, that there's that connection. So I totally recommend anyone doing that.
Yeah. I mean, my book's going to be read by either Morgan Freeman,
yeah,
or Anthony Hopkins.
They're tough to get, though. They're tough to get.
I mean, they've both committed. Benioff asked, but I was like, I don't know, man.
I got a couple options. I'm trying to, kind of flesh
I want to go more the Hollywood
see.
route. Yeah, no, but to what you're saying, this is why before we started recording, we were talking about producing the content and how you editing that and how you have someone that does that. And you said, do you want an introduction? I said, no, you're not taking that away from me. I love editing my own content. I edit all these videos. I produce all these videos and the podcast myself. And the reason I do that is because listening back to it, that's when I actually learn. I learn a lot more the second time. I was literally just on the way into the office today, re-listening to the episode with Dale Dupree. I hadn't listened to it since I edited it. And I was just like, damn, this is good, right? Not in an arrogant way, right? Because it's all about the guest, but it was just like, yeah, there's some value here that I didn't catch when I was having the conversation. I didn't fully catch when I was trying to edit this out, and now I'm really able to just sit here and take it in. So maybe now what you need to do is you wrote the book, you read the book, now you need to listen to yourself read the book, and maybe that's when you're really going to go boom. But anytime you can have a time capsule of a moment in your life that brings you back to a good place or an exciting time, it's always a good thing. And we can associate that with sales experiences if we need to, but I don't think I need to go down that road again. So anyway, this has been great having you on. Thanks to everybody that tuned in to the Buyer Enablement Podcast. We'll be back in roughly 2 weeks. You know how I roll. I try to keep a new one out every 2 weeks, but I also have a business to run, so other things get in the way sometimes, so bear with me. Make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast, or just check us out on YouTube so you can watch the whole video and see this poster that was behind this guest's head that we were talking about at the end of this episode in real life. We'll see you in a couple weeks, and thanks again, David. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks so much, Josh. Take care.